Dan Scollin is our next speaker. Dan has taught geography, geographic information systems, natural resources, and global education programs at Shasta College in Reading since 1996. Dan has been a member of the Map Society and attended various events for quite some time, and we're really grateful to have him here. His academic background includes degrees in computer science and geography. I don't know if you're going to show any pictures of your travels around the world when you were a tad bit younger. He did at the last event that we had, and it was wonderful. Dan has traveled extensively. His work with students and community includes co-founding the web platform North State GIS and Reading Area GIS User Group. That's Geographic Information Systems. Other affiliations include Shasta Living Streets, Local Indians for Education, Shasta Land Trust, and many more. Dan is married with 2 college-age children, enjoys hiking, cycling, playing, and listening to music, being engaged in the issues of the day, reading about people and places, and he is also the host of a weekly radio jazz show. Dan Scollin, thank you.
Okay, my name is Dan Scollin. I am a geographer, educator, and geographic information systems professional in that order, at least according to my priority list. And I'm going to be talking about historic to digital maps, from instruments of power to tools of empowerment. I'm starting off here with 2 maps. The map on the left is an 1859 map of the area shown on the right, which is a contemporary hillshade. It's an area that we're going to be visiting here as we proceed through the presentation, just to the east of Reading. Of course, maps are among humankind's great innovations and are the product of a long history of technological innovation. This is accelerated over the past 50 years with advancements in information, communication, and imaging technologies. GIS, GPS, and remote sensing, the 3 pillars of geospatial technologies, have recently been augmented by LiDAR and drones, miniaturization of devices, and cloud computing, and increasingly artificial intelligence. The result has been that maps have become ubiquitous. They have become critical to the functioning of businesses and government and nonprofit organizations, including being part of a fixture of our daily lives. What is often lost in the mix as we embrace these new technologies is the value that historic maps hold in terms of being a source of information to address a variety of interests and needs. Historically, maps enabled exploration and discovery, land delineation, and resource inventory, but also exploitation, land appropriation, and colonization. In many ways, maps enabled the powerful to subjugate the less powerful. In many ways, these dynamics persist today, contributing to the widening gulf of wealth and opportunity that we see in our communities and in the world. Yet there has been an explosion of easy-to-use mapping technologies and mapping applications, as well as open source data, which has empowered marginalized populations to tell their stories, redress past injustices, and reclaim their futures. So my interest, I think, early on in historic maps derived from this map on the left, the historic map of the Klamath Mountain province from 1964. And I loved this map because I have spent so much time in the region over the years, and it really helped me to visualize where these various mountain spines helped to dictate the path of the rivers that run through this great physiographic province. It inspired me and my own cartographic work, which you can see the product of on the right-hand side. And this is part of my own belief in the fact that I think that one's own personal experience with a place and a region is perhaps the most value that we can bring to it. And I've now lived in the Reading area for the better part of 28 years and had lots of opportunities to explore this fantastic part of our state. I attended a talk by Susan Schulten, hosted by the California Map Society a few years back. You see her book down in the lower right-hand corner there. And I was inspired to create this story map, in part by way of sort of revealing this emerging interest in historic maps to my students. We had a very cogent and wonderful description of the Cherokee deerskin map, which inspired me in part because I have a long history. Tom sort of alluded to my history, particularly on the island of Borneo, where I lived when I was a boy, and then returned back after my master's thesis, and got involved in participatory mapping, working with indigenous Dayaks. This program continues 25 years later, still plays an important role. And I'm currently working on a paper with someone at the East-West Center on Honolulu, where we're looking at how participatory mapping in Indonesia has played out over a number of decades. This is a map that I reviewed a few years ago in Calafia. Thank you to Juliet for her steady hand and helpful input as I went through the writing process on this. And I brought this map up partly because of my personal interest in Native American studies and Native California studies, and also because there were some really interesting cartographic aspects to this map that I wanted to share as well. And there was a number of things that I found of interest on this map. It's showing language groups, sort of dominant colors are language groups, and we have tribal groups, the Achimawi. You can visit Achimawi State Park in northeastern California, but also these references to not only Indian reservations, but also incidents through the history of the period. So for example, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner of this map, you'll see reference to a military outpost to check hostile Indians from 1865 to 1892, which is a rather euphemistic statement of the ways in which whites encountered Native Californians. By the way, I will point out that Fort Crook, you're going to see a Fort Crook crop up here shortly in the presentation. The reality of our historic treatment of Native peoples was the topic of Benjamin Madley's 2016 book published by Yale University Press, in which he exhaustively documents massacres, forced relocations, slave raids, bounty hunting, cultural suppression, and destruction of food resources. You see the quote from the book, "Vigilantes and militias took full advantage of the state of California's anti-Indian legal system to kill thousands of California Indians." And this is actually Captain Jack, the famous Modoc chief of the Modoc Wars, featured in the photo. And again, something that piqued my interest and something that I wanted to explore more. You see the flyer in the right-hand side of the slide here, which illustrates this sort of propaganda war, if you will, that was part of this. So there are a variety of interesting applications that have emerged in recent decades. I'm highlighting two here. On the left-hand side is the Native Lands Digital Project, which emerged out of Canada. And you can see that they highlight territories, languages, and treaties. This is actually a global map with some notable holes in different parts of the world. And when I reached out to the map makers, they encouraged input. By the way, you see the just staggering diversity of Native populations that existed in Northern California at the time. So Cape Mendocino and on north to the Oregon border. And then on the right-hand side is the Digital Atlas of California Native Americans from the Native American Heritage Commission for the state of California. A couple of things that were of interest to me with these maps, in particular, was the representation of boundaries or borders. Native populations of California had very fluid borders, if borders at all, and figuring out where these boundaries were located was handled in different ways. So in the case of the Native Lands Project, they had non-contiguous overlapping polygons. In the case of the state of California map, they don't show polygons at all, but if you click on the map, it'll show a polygon. And actually the polygon I have highlighted, which is shown in blue, indicates an overlap between the Yana and the Wintu, or the northern Wintun, which is an area that we're going to be visiting here shortly. The other thing I want to highlight in the lower right-hand corner is the value of non-spatial data that has geographic references to it. And so they have a list of these various incidents and massacres that occurred through time. And among this list is up to 93 Wintu Indians that were killed 16 miles east of Redding, California. So you'll have these things that weren't necessarily mapped, but actually show up with some degree of spatial reference to them. So I've had the opportunity in recent years to start working with a number of different Native American groups and individuals in Northern California, which has been a great joy and an honor and something that I hope to continue with in the future. The local Indians for Education. I had a Native student years ago and met him and his wife later on, and she was interested in kind of bringing GIS and GPS into some of their education efforts. So you see the young guy in the lower right. I recently taught just a sort of basics of map and GPS workshop. During the course of the workshop, as I was teaching these younger students, one of the women chimed up in the back and said, "You guys need to learn this stuff if you're going to protect your land." And I had to know how to use GPS to find my native plant collection site and my hunting site. So you better learn this stuff, which of course is the best thing a teacher can have, right? When somebody else tells them they need to know this stuff too. And I get out in the field with my students. We're out here with a tribal leader from the Karuk of the Central Klamath River region, talking about cultural fire, of which the Karuk is starting to work with the Forest Service to actually start implementing cultural fire, but also the hope that comes along with the removal of dams, which many of you have been reading and hearing about in the Upper Klamath River region. I mentioned Fort Crook. I happened to stumble on the Fort Crook Museum recently, and I was quite impressed with their collection of native artifacts and native baskets. California Indians were widely believed to be some of the finest basket weavers on earth, and just quite an impressive collection. And as you might have suspected, Fort Crook was part of the effort to stem hostile Indians, as the euphemism went. In the lower right-hand corner, this Wintu individual, longtime member of the community who was part of the workshop that I was teaching, recently asked me to come out to digging out a historical burial site. And in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the newly constructed house that is being built. So as part of the workshop, we brought this historic map in, and we geo-referenced this map, and we had the students digitize these historic village sites, which the students, some of them were quite squirrely, but they seemed to really enjoy this process of clicking on the dot, inputting the information, although, as you might suspect, some quality control of these teenagers was warranted. In the upper right-hand corner is the source map, an 1889 map, and what you'll see is this is 239 villages that were mapped in this area. And in this Stillwater sub-area, which is an area that surrounds the Shasta College main campus, in 1889, they had inventoried over 12,000 Native people. On the left-hand side, Curtin was the source. Many of you have heard of Kroeber, the UC Berkeley anthropologist, so you can see the different boundaries between the Yana and the Wintu. Again, I alluded to that a moment ago on the Heritage Commission map as to where this boundary should be drawn. So this is a version of the map that I put together, purposefully sort of included the rivers and using the hill shade here to try to not give reference to the contemporary place names, but just to give a sense of the population of this area. And your luck is, good luck trying to parse out the names. Of course, these were the anglicized versions of these place names in this particular area. And this is a view of what that looks like under the contemporary base map of the area. And that polygon is Shasta College, the Shasta College campus that I work at. So you can see two village sites on that campus site. And this became personal because this Tsarao village is basically in my backyard. And just to show you the kind of information that was available, so they show us the translation into Sandflat Village. They show us the number of houses that were available, and they show us the chief of each of the sub-villages and the translation of each chief's name. So just a tremendous wealth of information available on this particular map. I wanted to include this map, which is a rather uninteresting and uninspiring map showing the area from Redding basically to the northeast corner of California. And what this is showing is what are recognized as the federal American Indian reservations by way of showing the paucity of land that is designated as such. And so I think that the information in the preceding map, I would like to suggest, could inform maps like these. So there is a group that I've been working with, and another former student has started this group called the Native Roots Network, and they recently put together a story map of their effort describing land rematriation. which is an interesting spin on the repatriation side of things. I had a discussion at the break, someone talking about patriarchy and matriarchy, and which of these were matriarchal societies. So the black marker is the location of this 10-acre property, which they recently closed title on. It's the first collectively native-owned property since the gold rush, and is quite an inspiring undertaking. The mustard-colored polygon is the approximate location of the 1851 treaty. Like most of the treaties in California, it was never ratified. The state government fought vociferously to not ratify the treaties that were drawn up in the early 1850s. So they've asked to, by way of sort of indigenizing this property, they've asked us to help them sort of look at and locate some information about what was historically on this property. So the pink polygon that you see up there is this 10-acre parcel, and the first map that I had at the beginning of the presentation, the 1859 map, is shown there. You see Woodman's Road, for example, kind of running very close to where this property was. By the way, the public land survey, the township section and range, is invaluable when it comes to georeferencing maps. You can see the 1894 Red Bluff map in the upper right-hand corner. This at a 250,000 scale, but you start to see some of the names of the sort of prominent landholders in the area. In the lower left, you see the Reading 1901 map from 1901 at 125,000 scale. And now you can start to see a railroad line running through presently the area, this area is known as Bella Vista. So most of the people in the North State will recognize this name, Bella Vista. And then in the lower right-hand corner of the 1965 1 to 24,000 scale map. ESRI has, the big ArcGIS software vendor has recently put out a historic topographic map viewer, which you can check out, and these maps were actually derived from that source. So they went and georeferenced a lot of these sources, and you can just kind of locate any place in the United States and sort of sequence through the historic maps in that way. So I've got a student who's doing a little internship, and so I tasked him with digitizing some of these historic features. And so what you're looking at here are from the 1894 map that you saw in the preceding slide, the roads and places that were shown from the 1901 map. You can see the roads and railroads that are shown. Building out a table, you can see a lot of the roads weren't named, so we'll have some work to do in terms of going to the recorder's office or what have you to see if we can identify what those names are. And as anybody who's been involved with georeferencing knows that it's an inexact science, and so I wanted to point out in this lower right-hand corner a little bit of a discrepancy between the base map and the reference from 1901. I'm going to detect a little bit of an offset there that may be something that we need to look at in terms of resolving. Again, the idea to build a geographic database of where we have some of these different sites. They might guide some field work and help us just to understand the changes that have taken place through time. So I mentioned I helped them to put a story map together. So I like their description of advancing indigenous-led pathways for just and vibrant communities. And they're doing a lot of interesting thing and coordinating with different groups. I alluded to this project earlier for the removal, what's now described as the largest dam removal project in US history. And the Shasta Indian Nation was getting a bunch of homeland back, 2,500 acres or something along the order of that, as part of this project. I also sit on the California Geographic Information Association, and one of the fellow board members is a woman named Donna Miranda Begay, who started the California Tribal Geographic Information Systems group, and there's a wide recognition that GIS is a critical tool for addressing a lot of these needs in advancing some of these indigenous concerns. So in another project, there's a friend who's working on a Black history and housing project in the Reading area. And what you're looking at here is a 1946, 48 aerial image superimposed on the current road system. And Linden Avenue is at the sort of in the center of the screen there, and there was a very vibrant neighborhood that was right adjacent to this. And this is a black neighborhood, predominantly African-American neighborhood. And it's really interesting to look back through the various sort of news articles of the time that was referring to this area as being a ghetto or blighted. The city permitted a landfill at the hill, on the hill above this, and eventually ended up condemning the neighborhood. Interestingly enough, at the top of the slide, you'll see this is the current label off of the base map, which is the Mercy Medical Center complex, the largest medical center complex in Reading that is up on the hill above this area as well. And so this picture on the left, the ABC grocery store, was sort of the last one that was fighting this, this group. My student working along here. I'm going to go ahead and move through a few things. If you haven't been into a lot of rural parts of California, there is a boarded up buildings at every turn. And this map I thought was sort of interesting, showing better times in Aden, or in the area around Bieber, California. So I think there's some interesting applications for what was it here in the past and how these areas are moving forward. Rebecca Solnit's wonderful Infinite City map has among its maps butterfly habitats and queer public spaces. So there are hidden histories to be found all over the place, lots of opportunities. This was something that was in the Calafia recently from the Boston Public Library, put this together. I'm going to have to race through a little bit of just some general process stuff. Great resource here, the University Consortium on GI Science, and they talk about the use of historic maps. The process of georeferencing, adding control points, and of course the Rumsey collection has a wonderful georeferencer if you haven't checked it out. And integration of old cadastral maps into up-to-date geodatabases for urban planning. So a lot of interest in that. There's various tools that are coming out for vectorizing buildings to be able to sort of automate the process. Not surprisingly, AI is into the mix now. And so we have QGIS, the open source GIS platform, has an AI map tracing plugin tool that you can use to actually draw and kind of extract polygons and lines and points off of these historic maps. And kind of aggregating past maps together. This is an effort to update the Alaska geologic map based on past maps. And as a closing, it's a wonderful article Barry Lopez wrote, The Mappist, featuring this cartographer, Carlos Benefidio. And he states that I do not have to live up to the history of Venice, but I am obliged to shoulder the history of my own country. And with that, happy to...
We've got time for questions.
Could you just bring back that butterfly map you had? It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a really fun atlas if you've never seen it before, juxtaposing all sorts of strange subjects you wouldn't necessarily think were mappable.
So California indigenous culture is not exactly all sweetness and light. What sort of politics have you run into in this process?
Yes. As a non-native person, I have done my best to keep my distance from it, and I think it is a challenge, although as one pointed out to me, these sort of conflicts exist within society itself as well. But yeah, I think, a lot of these efforts, they're really trying to make them non-affiliated, like the Life Center is non-affiliated, the Native Roots Network is non-affiliated. So I think they're trying to sort of navigate around that a little bit, because in the workshop that I just did, when they went around and did introductions, there was 25 tribal groups that were represented from across the country. So, you have a lot of...
Yeah, we've got a couple questions back there. Why don't you go to Min first?
Hi, thank you for this presentation. It's wonderful. So you've gone through a kind of a whirlwind tour of a lot of these different projects. I'm curious, like each time a group wants to have their heritage mapped, do you kind of like reinvent the wheel? To what extent can you build on previous efforts?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'm a community college teacher and I'm a geographer, so I'm a jack of all trades in multiple respects, I guess. So yeah, a lot of this has been sort of my own personal interest and then building off of things. So certainly the participatory mapping stuff that I've done in the past has informed the stuff that's happening lately. And a lot of it is about everything prioritizes back to the interests of the tribes. Data sovereignty is a huge issue and a huge concern because there's a lot of trust issues, right? It's sort of the proverbial, I'm from the government, I'm here to help sort of problem, right? So standing back and just finding out, and then the appropriate technology. And I felt that with those young kids, because it's sort of like, they're so screen driven that I was kind of wanting them to like, this is a compass. Look at what direction are you facing? The sun is at your back, and getting them away from just sort of the digital side of things, but then also show them skills that may be useful moving forward.
Reiterate, I guess, in a way, but navigating the tribes, they're not all of one mind, right? They have their own disagreements that you probably don't want to get in the middle of anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, one more question. Here comes a mic. Hold on a second. Here comes a mic.
San Francisco. My last name's Ergel, E-A-R-G-L-E. He was a chemist at UCSF for a career, and then when he retired, he started writing a story of the contemporary state of Native American groups in California. And one of the things he cited was that there were the richest variety of languages in the world is in New Guinea. The second most is in California because there was never a tribal dominance by one group that enforced a uniform language throughout the tribes. Can you add anything to that? How accurate is that? Is that true?
I think I've heard that same 1-2 list. And yeah, the history is fascinating. And of course, a huge part of this, and this group will appreciate this, along the lines of some of the earlier presentations, it's a real sleuthing project, right? Because so much information has been lost, and you can, so to be able to go back to the sources and find out the information that you can, but certainly the linguistic diversity, the cultural, tribal diversity is really unparalleled.
Talking earlier about the predominance of matriarchal cultures, right? Patriarchal cultures amongst Native Americans. Do you know anything about that as a trend within language groups within California?
Yeah, I don't. And I would wish I had my anthropologist friend from the college standing next to me because I'm not an anthropologist. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Dan, thank you very much.